My name is Hazel Okafor, and I am 31 years old. I was 11 days away from closing on my first home when my brother called my parents and told them I had been lying to the family for years. That was the moment everything I had saved for, every overtime shift at the hospital, every winter I had eaten rice and lentils to put money aside, became a bargaining chip in a conversation I was not invited to have. Let me back up. I work as a registered nurse at a regional hospital in Guelph, Ontario. I have worked there for 6 years. I am good at my job in the way that people who grew up being told they had to be twice as good to get half as far tend to be good at things. Quietly, consistently, without much fanfare. I do not say this for sympathy. I say it because the version of me my brother had been selling to my parents for the better part of a decade looked nothing like that woman. In his version, I was reckless, irresponsible. Someone who had gotten lucky with a stable job, but could not be trusted to make serious decisions without guidance. He had been building this version of me slowly, the way you renovate a house one room at a time, so gradually that the people living inside it do not notice the walls moving, until one day the space feels entirely different, and they cannot remember when it changed. My brother's name is not important. In this story, I will call him what he has always been to everyone in my family. My older brother. He is 35. He is the firstborn son of Nigerian-Canadian parents who came to this country in the early 90s with 2 suitcases and a determination that their children would not struggle the way they had. He has coasted on that narrative his entire life without contributing much to it. My parents are good people. I want to say that clearly and mean it, because this story is not about them being villains. They are people who worked extraordinarily hard, who sacrificed things I will never fully understand, and who made the very human mistake of pouring so much hope into their firstborn that they lost the ability to see him clearly. That is not malice. But it has consequences. The house I was buying was a semi-detached in a quiet part of Guelph. Built in the late 90s, good bones, small backyard with a maple tree that had probably been there longer than the house itself. I had been pre-approved for a mortgage through RBC. My down payment, just over $60,000, had taken me 4.5 years to save. I had used the First Home Savings account when it launched in 2023. I had not taken a real vacation in 3 years, and I had been living in a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate named Denise, who charged me below market rent because she was a decent person and because she knew what I was working toward. The closing date was a Friday in late October. The Thursday before that Friday, I drove to my parents' house in Mississauga for what my mother had described over the phone as a family dinner. She made jollof rice and fried plantain and the chicken that she marinates for 24 hours and that I have been trying and failing to replicate for most of my adult life. My brother was already there when I arrived. He was sitting in the living room with his shoes still on, which my mother has asked him not to do for 35 years, and he was on his phone, barely glancing up when I came through the door. My father was at the dining table. He was not eating yet. He was sitting with his hands folded, which is something he does when he has rehearsed what he is about to say. I should have turned around. Instead, I sat down, accepted the Sprite my mother handed me, and waited. My father said they needed to talk to me about the house. He said they had concerns. He said my brother had shared some information with them that made them worry I was not ready for this kind of commitment, financially or otherwise. He said this carefully, the way he says everything carefully, in that measured voice that I grew up understanding meant the conversation was not a conversation. It was a verdict that had already been reached. I looked at my brother. He was still looking at his phone. I asked what information. My father said that my brother had told them I had a significant amount of debt that I had not disclosed to the family. Credit card debt, specifically. He said my brother was concerned I had taken on this mortgage without being honest about my full financial picture, and that if I defaulted, it would reflect on the family name. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment because it was not straightforward anger. It was something colder than anger. It was the feeling of watching a lie being told about you in a room full of people who love you, and realizing that the lie has been in that room longer than you have. I asked my brother directly when he had seen my credit card statements. He finally put his phone down. He said he had not seen them, but that he had heard things. He said people talked. He said he was just looking out for me. I asked him what people. I asked him specifically what he had heard and from whom he did not answer. He looked at my father instead. And my father, who has not looked at my brother the way a man looks at someone who might be lying for as long as I can remember, said that it did not matter where the information came from. What mattered was the concern. What mattered was the family discussing it together. My mother did not say anything. She brought more rice to the table and sat down and looked at her plate. I have spent my whole life watching my mother look at her plate in moments like this. I took a breath, and I said, as calmly as I could manage, that I did not have significant credit card debt. I said I had one credit card with a $4,000 limit that I paid in full every month, which any bank would confirm since I had just gone through a full mortgage application process that scrutinizes exactly these things. I said RBC had reviewed 6 years of financial history before approving me. I said I had a written pre-approval letter, a lawyer, and a closing date in 11 days. My father nodded slowly in the way that meant he had heard me but was not convinced. My brother said he just wanted to make sure I was not making a mistake. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I said, fine. I said it the way you say a word when you have decided to stop arguing, not because you have lost, but because you have realized the fight is not the one you thought it was. My father nodded like he had won something. My brother reached across the table and took more plantain. I ate dinner. I helped my mother clear the plates. I hugged both my parents at the door and drove back to Guelph in the dark with the radio off, and the highway unrolling ahead of me in a way that felt unusually clear for 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. I did not sleep well. I lay in my bed in the apartment I was about to leave, and I thought about the way my brother had looked at my father instead of at me. I thought about what you have to believe about a person to take their word over 6 years of documented financial history. I thought about the basketball trophy on my parents' mantelpiece that still has my brother's name on it from a rec league tournament in 2007. At 7 in the morning, I texted my lawyer, Adwoa, to confirm we were still on track for Friday. She replied within 10 minutes. Everything is in order. See you at 1 o'clock. At 8:15, my phone rang. It was my brother. He didn't say hello. He just said, "Tell me you didn't send anything to Mom and Dad." I stared at that sentence for a moment because I had not sent anything to anyone. I had driven home. I had lain awake. I had texted my lawyer about a closing appointment. I said, "Send what?" He went quiet. The specific quality of that silence was one I had never heard from him before. It was not the silence of someone composing their next argument. It was the silence of someone doing a rapid and frightening calculation about what they might have exposed. He said, "Never mind." He said it quickly, the way you say never mind when you absolutely do not mean never mind. He hung up before I could say anything else. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in both hands, and I thought, whatever he is afraid I sent, I have not sent it yet. I want you to understand something. I am not a person who looks for conflict. I went into nursing because I am genuinely oriented toward helping people, toward reducing suffering where I can. I had spent 31 years choosing accommodation over confrontation in my family because I believed that love required it. My brother was my older brother. My parents were my parents. You do not burn those things down lightly, but I am also a woman who spent 4.5 years eating lentils to save $60,000. And something about his voice on that phone call, the fear in it, the rawness of it, told me that whatever he had been carrying into those conversations with my parents, it was heavier than I knew. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been expecting me to call. I asked her if she was home. She said yes. I asked if my father was there. She said he had gone to the hardware store. I said I needed to ask her something directly, and I needed her to answer me honestly. I asked her if my brother had borrowed money from my parents recently. There was a pause that lasted long enough for me to understand the answer before she gave it. She said, quietly, carefully, in the voice she uses when she is telling me something she has been asked not to tell, that yes, my brother had asked my parents for money last spring, a significant amount. He had told them it was for a business opportunity, a franchise investment in a courier logistics company. They had given him $42,000 from their retirement savings, the RRSP withdrawal that my father had mentioned in passing to me last summer, and then refused to discuss further. She said the investment had not gone the way my brother said it would. She said the money was gone. She said my brother had told them that if they could convince me to delay the house purchase, he would have more time to figure out a repayment plan, because he was worried about their financial security. I sat with that for a moment. He had gone to my parents, told them I was reckless with money, and used their fear about my choices to buy himself time on a debt he owed them. He had walked into that dining room and redirected their anxiety away from his $42,000 failure and aimed it squarely at my 11 days away mortgage closing. And my parents, who had spent decades finding it easier to believe in my brother's version of events, had sat across from me at that dinner table and delivered his message without knowing it was his message. My mother was crying by the time she finished telling me. Not the composed, managed tears she uses in difficult conversations. Real crying. The kind that sounds like something giving way. She said she hadn't known. She said she had not understood what he was doing. She said my father didn't know either, not the full picture. He had only known there was concern about my finances. I believed her, and I also knew that not seeing what was right in front of her had required years of careful not looking. I told her I needed to call her back. I sat in my apartment and I thought about what to do next. I am not going to pretend that I was perfectly calm and strategic. I was not. I cried for about 20 minutes, the ugly, functional kind of crying that gets something out of your system so you can think straight afterward. Denise knocked on my door at some point, and I said I was fine, and she said okay, and I heard her put the kettle on in the kitchen, and that small domestic sound was one of the kindest things anyone has done for me. Then I stopped crying and I started thinking. My brother was afraid I had sent something to our parents. He had called me at 8:15 in the morning, before I had done anything, which meant his guilt was running faster than my actions. The fear in his voice was not manufactured. He knew what he had done, and he knew that if our parents found out the full shape of it, they would see the dinner table conversation very differently. I picked up my phone and I called my father. He answered on the third ring. He sounded distracted, slightly impatient, the way he sounds when he is at the hardware store, and someone is pulling him away from the thing he came to look at. I said, "Dad, I need you to ask your brother." I caught myself. "I need you to ask my brother directly whether he borrowed money from you, and whether any part of last night's conversation was connected to that." There was a pause. I said, "I did not have this conversation with Mom. I am asking you to have it with him. Not because I want to cause a problem. Because I think you deserve to know who was actually at that table last night." He said he would call me back. I went to work. I did a 12-hour shift at the hospital because I had already arranged to take Friday off for the closing, and I was not going to sit in my apartment and wait. I checked a man in his 70s who had come in with chest pain that turned out to be costochondritis. I helped a young woman who had broken her wrist falling off a step at her daughter's school. I did the work that I do every day, and that exists entirely independently of whatever anyone in my family believes about who I am. My father called at 6:47 in the evening. Not while I was at work, I had my phone off, but there was a voicemail waiting for me when I got to my car in the hospital parking lot. He did not leave a long message. My father is not a long message person. He said, "Hazel, call me when you get this." I called him from the parking lot with the heat running and the windows fogging slightly at the edges. He sounded different from how he had sounded at the hardware store. He sounded the way he sounded when I was 16, and I came home from school to find him sitting alone at the kitchen table after finding out his brother back home had passed. Not grief, exactly. More like the weight of something that has been true for a while, finally landing on your chest where you can feel it. He said he had spoken to my brother. He said my brother had confirmed the loan. He said my brother had confirmed that he had suggested, in the conversation with my parents the week before, that they speak to me about my finances. He said my brother had not confirmed the full connection between those two things, had not admitted he had done it deliberately, had not said the words out loud, but my father said he could see the shape of it clearly enough. He said he had not asked my brother to leave, but that my brother had left anyway. He said, "I owe you an apology, Hazel." 5 words. From a man who has said "I love you" perhaps a dozen times in my entire life, always quietly, always looking slightly to the side. 5 words was significant. He said he had let himself be guided by the wrong person's version of the story for a long time. He said he did not know exactly when it had become a habit, but that he recognized it now and that he was sorry. He said the house was mine and that I should close on Friday. I held the phone against my ear in the fogged-up parking lot for a moment after he stopped speaking. I said, "Thank you, Dad, that was enough." I closed on the house on Friday at 1 in the afternoon. Adwoa had all the paperwork organized. The seller's agent was pleasant. We sat across a boardroom table in a law office on Stone Road, and I signed my name more times than I had expected. And then I walked out of that building with a set of keys in my hand that belonged to a door that was mine. I stood on the sidewalk outside the law office in the October cold, with those keys in my hand for probably 30 seconds before I started crying again. Different crying than the day before. Denise met me at the new house an hour later, with 2 coffees from the Tim Hortons on the corner, and we walked through every room in a building that smelled like fresh paint and someone else's laundry, and she did not say anything sentimental. She just said, "This is a good kitchen," and I thought, yes, it is. The weeks after that were the practical, unglamorous kind of hard. I arranged movers, I set up utilities. I bought a shower curtain rod at Canadian Tire at 9 on a Sunday morning, and felt a specific and uncomplicated happiness about it. I started working out which furniture I actually needed versus which furniture I had been meaning to get for years, and never had a place to put. My parents came to see the house 3 weeks after closing. My mother brought food, of course, enough to fill my new refrigerator twice over, and my father walked through each room quietly, and then stood in the backyard looking at the maple tree for a while. He said the tree was probably 50 years old. I said I thought so too. He nodded. My brother and I have not spoken since the night I called our father from the parking lot. I do not know when or whether that will change. I have stopped trying to predict it or plan for it or decide in advance what forgiveness is supposed to look like or what conditions it needs to meet. What I know is that I am a homeowner. I have a backyard with a 50-year-old maple tree. I wake up in the morning in a house that is mine, and I make coffee in a kitchen that my mother approved of, and I go to work and I take care of people who need taking care of, and I am very good at it. The $60,000 I saved is the most concrete thing I have ever built, but it is not the thing I am most proud of. What I am most proud of is that I knew, sitting in that dining room on that Thursday night, hearing a lie about my own life delivered by my father's careful voice, that the lie was a lie. I did not crumble. I did not perform a defense. I said one word and I left, and I let the truth do what truth does. When you stop covering for the people who are afraid of it, nobody can take that back. Not ever. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever sat at a table where someone was being believed over you for no reason that had anything to do with facts, then you already know why this matters. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one.